Here are some AMC8 last minute tips that might help you get a higher score on the test. So we'll start with math strategies. I would suggest that you memorize the prime factorization of the year you are taking the test. So if you're taking it the year this video is being made, I'd memorize the prime factorization of 2024 because a lot of problems on the AMC8, they want to include the year somehow. And so you'll save a lot of time if you know the prime factorization of this year right away. Another strategy is to plug in the answer choices that a problem gives you to help figure out the answer. This won't always work. It won't always be as efficient or possible given the structure of the problem, but if it's possible and not too much work, I would suggest this. Next, the geometry diagrams are usually to scale. From my experience doing problems on the AMC8, I would just be careful with this one. But using the diagrams to help you and just note that they're usually to scale might be helpful. And don't be scared by problems near the end, like problem 20, 21 to 25, because yeah, they're supposed to be harder, but there have been some years, like on AMC10 this year, on the 2023 AMC10B, like the problems at the end weren't really that hard, and you don't want to like see some problem like problem 22 and be like, oh, I can't do that one. In reality, you can. So don't be scared by problems near the end. So now we'll talk about test day and the day before the test. I would say stick to your normal routine and don't change anything. So yeah, I have this like story where I had this geometry test, which wasn't really that big of a deal, but I had nothing to do before the test, so I went and got a cup of coffee, which I don't usually do. And during the test, I was super nervous and super alert, and whenever I saw something that I couldn't figure out immediately, I was just in panic mode. So I wouldn't don't drink 2 cups of coffee before the test if that's not something you usually do, stuff like that. But always get enough sleep the night before. If it's like the day of the test or the night before the test, please don't cram, because in my experience, cramming just takes away from my sleep, and at the end of the day, it doesn't really help. I don't really digest all the information I cram in because it's too much. This is a big one for me. Pack your preferred writing utensil and color pens. I think color pens are really helpful for geometry problems, and yeah. And if your test proctor is just saying hey, come grab some scratch paper, just get a lot, honestly, because what you don't want is to run out of scratch paper and be writing all your calculations on the corner of your paper. Just get a lot of paper for yourself. And sit where you can focus on the day of the test. I know this isn't always possible, but if you can choose where you sit, for me personally, I like sitting at the front of the room because I can't see anyone else. It lets me focus on myself and my own test. So I would consider this. Now for guessing strategies. On the AMC8, you don't get any penalty for getting a question wrong, and you don't get any benefit from leaving it blank. So at the end of the test, I would save a little bit of time for just guessing all the problems that you haven't gotten to. And the amount of time depends on how many problems you've left unanswered. So one tip I have is not to guess answer choices that are obvious outliers. So if you see answer choices A to E, say all of them are integers except answer choice C, which is the square root of 3. I honestly, if I was guessing, I would not guess C just because it's too obvious, and I feel like in my experience, usually the answer choices are more subtle than that. And if you see a problem that's like, what is the highest possible value of blank or the lowest possible value of blank, I would not just guess like the highest or lowest answer choice. Rarely that is the right answer, but usually the right answer is somewhere near the middle, or at least not at the very edge of the answer choices. And I've heard people talk about like which letters are most likely answer choice. And I've looked at a few of the answer keys from previous tests, and sometimes one letter is more common in one test, but across all tests, there seems to be no like letter that's more likely. And remember, you have a 1/5 probability of guessing the right answer. Yeah. So best performance strategies. If you're stuck, I would suggest just keep the pencil moving. This is what one of my math instructors told me. And for me, I feel like when I get stuck on a problem, I just sit there and like get frustrated and try to think of like ideas all the way through. But if I just like keep my pencil moving and start calculating some stuff and actually like writing down some calculations, like I think I make a lot more progress. I would assess your weaknesses, and hopefully by now you've taken a few practice tests for the AMC8. If you haven't, either way, I think it's good to think about what type of problem solver you are. So if you are the type of person that like messes up simple calculations really easily, like does these sillies, like I would spend more time like checking your answers when you're taking the test. If you're someone that's very accurate, I would suggest you try as many problems as you can. And this is a suggestion that applies to almost everyone, I would say, which is to skip around the problem set if you're stuck. This is so important because sometimes in the test they'll have like problem 10 be like unusually hard, and like the problems after it be like easier, or there'll be some problems that are just like harder than they should be in like the order of difficulty, like from problem 1 to problem 25. So don't let those weird problems like get you stuck, because there's such a waste of time, and like you don't want that to happen to you. So please, like if you're stuck, skip around. And I think focus is a really important thing for the test, because like for me, I feel like sometimes I get distracted by like other people. I like look at them when they're like scribbling away on their scratch paper. I would focus on the test and just keep your mind trained on the test. If you stray away from the test, like mentally, still like be kind to yourself. Like don't like beat yourself up for like not focusing, but like just be kind to yourself, but also just like try to focus. And this is a big one. Keep your scratch paper relatively organized. It's so much easier when you've done a bunch of problems and you want to like go back to some problem you did a few minutes before. It's so much efficient to like find where your work was if you like keep your scratch paper like relatively organized, like writing everything for one problem in like one corner or like one section of your scratch paper. Because if you're writing things all over the place, you're just going to confuse yourself if you want to go back and check your work. Yeah, and one big strategy for me was to write down problems that I wanted to check if time allows, because there were problems I felt really unsure about. But I wouldn't go overboard with this tip and write down like any problem you haven't checked, because if you're checking like every problem, that's gonna waste a lot of time. And yeah, just like you can do this, and yeah, good luck. Thanks for watching. If you found this helpful, please subscribe.